And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. First established by the Mining Association of Canada in 2004. Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. First established by the Mining Association of Canada in 2004, TSM was the first mining standard in the world to require site-level reporting for external verification. The program is mandatory for all companies that are members of the implementing associations. On today's Open Connection, President and CEO of the Mining Association of Canada, Pierre Gratton.
Last year, when I addressed the Vancouver Board of Trade, I observed that there is no sector that is as inextricably linked to humanity's evolution as mining. Indeed, we have entire ages named after us. You need only think of the Iron Age or the Bronze Age. And today our sector is being called upon to help address the greatest crisis of our time, climate change, because of the essential role that minerals and metals play in the energy transition. Without mining, there are no electric vehicles, no wind farms, solar panels, no nuclear energy, no transmission lines, no pipelines. We face this challenge with an unnerving backdrop of record forest fires, hurricanes, flooding, and other alarming signs of an overheating planet. Recently, it was reported that 40.5 million acres of Canada have burned during this year's fire season, or the equivalent of 4 Switzerlands. The over 6,100 fires resulted in over 3,000 Environment Canada air quality alerts. I lived through those in Ottawa, where smoke was at times unbearable, and officially made this year's wildfire season 10 times worse on average than what Canada has experienced in the past. Flooding has devastated communities from coast to coast to coast. Heat waves have been oppressive, and it was sobering to learn that July 3rd was the hottest day on record globally. We also know that Indigenous communities are particularly vulnerable to extreme weather events. Last year, the Auditor General reported that since 2009, First Nations communities experienced more than 1,300 emergencies, leading to 580 evacuations affecting more than 130,000 people. With the effects from climate change being felt across the globe on an ever-increasing scale, greater pressure is being put on our sector to deliver the inputs that are needed to have a lower carbon future. And there are many reasons why Canada in particular is feeling the pressure to deliver these critical minerals. Consumer interest in Canada's metals and minerals is high, due in large part to our clean energy grid, our strong regulatory system, our leadership in ESG, and how we include and work with Indigenous peoples. Customers buying mining products from Canada can have confidence that they were mined responsibly to the world's highest standards and with fewer greenhouse gas emissions than anywhere else in the world. This is not to say that we are perfect and we don't have impacts that we have to manage or relationships that can be made stronger. But compared to the rest of the world, we do stand out. And I just reflect on last week's referendum in Australia, where the majority of the country voted against enshrining Indigenous rights in their constitution. And just reflect on that and think of how much further ahead we are here. I travel around the world in this job, meeting with ambassadors, senior government officials, mining chambers, other sectors, including the auto sector. And I'm proud to say that our mining sector is widely recognized as a global leader in its commitment to ESG. And it's supported by our association's Made in Canada standard called Towards Sustainable Mining. And if those of you are hearing about it for the first time, I do encourage you to look at our website and find out more about TSM, as we call it. Mining.ca is the website. TSM is a mandatory program of the Mining Association of Canada, and it has very strong commitments that are include companies evaluating and independently verifying their performance against a range of social environmental indicators, including how their relationships with Indigenous people. So not only is our sector playing a key role in sustainably producing low-carbon technologies, but it's also one of the most important economic contributors in the country. In 2022, we directly or indirectly contributed $148 billion, or roughly 6% to total GDP, employed close to 700,000 workers across the country, and proportionally we continues to be the largest employer of Indigenous peoples, who account for 11% of the sector's workforce.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Like we're saying with us, even before Canada was officially a country, the area now known as the Golden Triangle was the hub for prospectors looking to strike it rich. In 1861, Alexander Buck Chequet struck gold at the confluence of the Steen and Akuk rivers, kickstarting the Stikine Gold Rush. Let us return the conversation with Pierre.
Partnerships with Indigenous communities is also significant. There's now over 520 agreements between mining companies and Indigenous communities across Canada, which not only help ensure that benefits flow to communities, but also set out provisions related to employment, procurement, education, and environmental stewardship. While not as common in mining as in other industries, we are also seeing more interest in commercial partnerships, including equity ownership in the mine itself, such as the partnership between the Tahltan Nation and Skeena Resources, as well as community-led infrastructure projects that help facilitate mining development and generate benefits for the community. Our presence in BC is also significant. Home to more than 1,000 exploration and mining companies, BC is one of the top mining provinces in the country, with a production value of $18.2 billion in 2022. The province is home to innovative companies that are doing important work in lowering their own carbon footprint to ensure mining is done responsibly via standards like Towards Sustainable Mining. New Gold's New Afton mine, for example, was the recipient of the 2022 TSM Award of Excellence for its work in using innovative low-carbon technologies and battery electric loaders and trucks to enhance its energy performance. Teck Resources, another TSM implementing company, recently announced a $5 million donation to BC Parks Foundation to grow the province's world-class parks and protected areas, part of its commitment to be a nature-positive company by 2030. Teck's actions reflect a commitment to go beyond stewardship of their operations through investments in conservation, protection, and restoration beyond the mine gate. Far from being just focused on the environment, TSM also encompasses globally recognized standards in community engagement and energy efficiency. And investors, customers, and the public are taking notice of how TSM is leading to better mining practices. In fact, our most recent public opinion results indicate that after finding out that our sector is pioneering ESG standards through TSM, 88% of Canadians have an improved performance of the mining sector. Furthermore, companies that are implementing TSM show an 81% approval rating, compared to only 48% for non-Canadian mining conducted elsewhere in the world. Now, 81% is still 19% short of 100, which is, of course, must be the ultimate goal. But I'd like you to find me any politician in this room that ever gets 81%. So there you go. Not only are TSM's protocols regularly updated to reach ever higher benchmarks, but new elements are also added to the standard when rights holders, stakeholders, customers, and investors voice their interest in seeing data on how mines are performing in specific areas. For example, the TSM protocol focused on Indigenous relationships was significantly revised a few years ago to respond to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's call to action to corporate Canada. The protocol now more explicitly recognizes the principles of UNDRIP and free, prior, and informed consent, and assesses mines against a higher standard of performance for Indigenous engagement. Specific performance measures related to Indigenous relations, and also there's a specific indicator that looks at the quality of Indigenous relationships, but also another one that assesses the benefits and risks to communities from the community's perspective. It's all about companies and communities sitting down together and not having the company say, these are what we think your risks and benefits are, and let's tell you what we think you need to do. It's about sitting down with communities and saying, how do you see what we're doing here? What are the opportunities you want to take advantage of? What are the risks that you're worried about? And how do we work together? And that's what that particular element in TSM is driving towards. Another recent example is in the area of equity, diversity, and inclusion. Though in this case, one of the greatest advocates for this new protocol was our industry itself. To meet the increased demand for minerals and metals, the mining industry needs a highly skilled and diverse workforce, an area our sector, which continues to be predominantly white and male, has historically struggled with. As the sector enjoys a generally favorable price environment, the demand for people is once again increasing, and we are paying the price for our demographically homogeneous workforce. While Canada's mining sector may stand out for the progress it has made on Indigenous inclusion, women, individuals of diverse racial, ethnocultural, national backgrounds, sexual orientation, and gender identities continue to be underrepresented.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. Different perspectives and experiences from a diverse workforce spark new ideas and solutions to problems, fostering innovation. Embracing diversity can foster a more inclusive and positive work environment. Let's return the conversation with Pierre.
The benefits of a more diverse workforce are vast. According to Ernst & Young, on the importance of gender inclusion of women in mining in particular, greater emphasis on EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, at the corporate and mine site levels leads to many benefits, including enhanced economic results, environmental performance, greater innovation, improved safety outcomes, and strengthened community relationships. I'm sure it's no surprise to the women in this room, but men can be rougher with equipment. They may not be as careful. It's common knowledge now in our sector that when women are put in charge of many aspects of mining activity, it's done with more care. And we're losing out when we fail to attract more women into our industry. But it's more than that, because frankly, we're facing a people crisis. While our nation has an abundance of minerals and metals required for the world's transition to a low-carbon, clean economy, and is uniquely positioned to mine responsibly, safely, and sustainably, long-term social and demographic challenges undermine our ability to do so. Let me list just a few of the sort of data points behind this statement. We are facing an aging workforce with rising retirements while fewer young people are entering the industry. We're seeing decreasing enrollment in post-secondary mining programs, a historically low mining unemployment rate, under 1% in July 2023, while total employment has grown by 40% since January 2022. We continue to, as I mentioned, to attract and retain underrepresented groups, and to laser in on what I'm talking about, while undergraduate enrollment across all engineering programs is increasing, mining engineering enrollment decreased by 50% from 2014 to 2022. Geological engineering is also down, highlighting a bottleneck for attracting new talent. What these alarming statistics tell me is that we're not only failing to attract a more diverse workforce, we're failing to attract our traditional workforce. We have to do more and we have to do better and do it quickly if we are to make the most of the opportunities ahead. So it's with these goals in mind that we launched a new TSM protocol focused on equity, diversity, and inclusion, and enhanced our safety and health protocol to address psychological safety in respectful workplaces. TSM has a proven track record of driving change and performance improvement across the areas it tackles, whether it be Indigenous and community relationships, biodiversity, tailings management, or climate change. The hope and the goal is that these new TSM elements on EDI will drive the change we so desperately need. And we know it can be done. We need only look at BHP, the world's largest mining company, building the largest mining project in the history of Canada in Saskatchewan, the Jansen Potash Mine, on track for 50% of its workforce being female by the time the mine starts operating. BHP's commitment to diversity several years ago was met with a lot of skepticism and cynicism by their peers. Today, that skepticism is gone, replaced by imitation. No one thought they could do it, but they're doing it. It's taken a lot of hard work. It's taken a lot of effort to change attitudes and change practices, but they've done it, and it's thoroughly admirable, but also groundbreaking and having an influence across the industry. The new TSM EDI protocol was developed with substantial contributions from our National Advisory Panel, whose makeup is currently 50% Indigenous. The influence of Indigenous representatives on the protocol's development was therefore substantial, because inclusion is not just about increasing female representation in the mining sector, it's also about increasing further the participation of Indigenous people in our industry. We have made a lot of progress on Indigenous inclusion in the last 50 years, but we can always do more. The fastest growing population in Canada and the youngest population in Canada, Indigenous people are more important to mining than ever. We need and want to work with all of you to attract more Indigenous youth and women into our industry. Men too, but you get the point. All of this data I shared with you on our human resources challenges predates the anticipated surge in mining to meet the demand for new materials I was talking about. Let me remind you of the sheer quantities involved. A potential 500% increase in the production of minerals according to the World Bank, with EVs and battery storage driving about half of that demand growth from clean energy technologies until 2040, primarily due to the soaring battery materials involved.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Electric cars actually predate gasoline-powered cars that dominate our roads today. At the time, the automotive industry was still in its infancy, and different types of propulsion systems were being explored, including steam, gasoline, and electricity. In this final segment of Open Connection, Pierre some statistics of electric car sales.
That in Europe alone, electric vehicle sales increased by over 15% in 2022. Last month, however, it was further reported that year-over-year sales in Europe in 2023 increased by 50%, in Belgium by 200%. Growth of EV sales in North America is slower, but just under 50%, and therefore not insignificant. And this matters because the average electric vehicle battery contains roughly 185 kilograms of minerals, including lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite, copper, which is one of BC's largest metals produced here, iron and aluminum, also produced here. Canada not only produces all of these metals, we also have a vast and untapped reserves. With our electricity grid among the world's cleanest, with 82% coming from renewable or non-emitting sources, domestic production of critical minerals in Canada results in lower carbon-intensive finished products compared to global alternatives. Even if extracted from off-grid mines powered primarily by diesel, minerals and metals processed in Canada have some of the lowest carbon intensity in the world. There's a consultancy out of Britain that has done the analysis looking at nickel and copper and other products being produced globally, and Canada is right there on the far left of their graph with the lowest carbon content for many of these products. Countries like Take nickel, for example, countries like Indonesia and Philippines have 8 to 10 times more carbon in a pound of nickel than they do nickel coming out of Canada. It's for this reason that several global automotive and battery manufacturers like Volkswagen, Ford, and General Motors are choosing Canada for their factory sites and material suppliers. They're setting up shops in places like St. Thomas, Ontario, or Bécancour, Quebec, close to where many of the metals are sourced, and taking advantage of subsidies for material sourcing and production in North America. What this means is that we're going to have to grow the mining sector in a big way. We need more mines, smelters, refineries to feed the needs of battery plants, the EV value chain, and many other sectors. Our most widely reported hurdle, one of increasingly recognized by politicians and all parties, and now frequently referenced in the media, is Canada's inability to efficiently get mines permitted and into production. Though I'd add to this the human resources challenge I just spoke about. At present, from initial discovery to first breaking ground, a mining project can take 10 to 15 years. Reducing the time it takes for a project to be approved in Canada is essential. Last Friday, the Supreme Court of Canada weighed in with an opinion on the constitutionality of Canada's Impact Assessment Act. In our view, the adjustments needed to bring the Act into conformance with the Constitution should lead to more efficient reviews and help reinforce the points we have been making for years, which are as follows. We must improve coordination and alignment between the multiple provincial and federal approval processes to which mining projects are subject. Our governments have to stop talking about one project, one review. They need to make it so. The federal government in particular has to be more cooperative in enabling provinces, the primary regulator of mines, and Indigenous governments to run impact assessments. Last Friday, the Supreme Court of Canada, in an unusual departure, actually weighed in to say so as well. We need to improve coordination within the federal family to materially shorten post-impact assessment project permitting timelines and reduce the consultation burden imposed on communities, including Indigenous communities. I'm sure it's frustrating for you to have officials from one department come and talk to you about the potential impacts on your land, and then have another department come in a month later about the same project and the same land, but they've got a different permit, so they're asking you all over again. We hear often about the consultation burden that many communities face, that it can be just overwhelming. We need governments to become, more coordinated and more efficient. We need to tailor assessments to the material issues and avoid mountains of information requests that no one reads and that do not inform decisions. And we get at what those material issues are by engaging with communities and getting their views on what they're concerned about. We need to scope Indigenous consultation appropriately to focus on those most directly impacted and improve the capacity of officials charged with Indigenous engagement and consultation in an UNDRIP context.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection of his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.